My name is Jennifer Turner, for those of you who don't know me. I direct the China Environment Forum, been hanging out here at the Woodrow Wilson Center for 11 years. China Environment Forum, we been around for 13 years, and we pride ourselves in being the information clearinghouse, bringing together government, NGO, business, and researchers from around the world to work on energy and environmental issues in China. And speaking of which, Pete, my assistant, and I just came back from China, still gently jet-lagged, and I promise not to fall asleep on you, though, there you guys, where we were putting on our, basically a China Environment Forum roadshow with our colleagues from Circle of Blue on our project Choke Point China. We gave 15 presentations in 3 cities, Shanghai, Beijing, and Yinchuan, Ningxia province. Very dry. There isn't any water there. We gave talks about how energy development in US and China is impacting water resources. And it was, now I shouldn't train you, shouldn't brag, but actually, we were well received. Even the government folks thought that it was really interesting what we were doing and thought that this could be a good research agenda for US-China cooperation. So it was good. And those of you that are here, hopefully see you back on May 6th, where we're going to do Choke Point China meeting here. Also multimedia. But today we got multimedia. Our meeting is called Altered Landscapes, Golf Course Development in China. It was actually, when I first started here at the Wilson Center, I asked my then assistant to go check into golf courses, because I thought it was kind of wild that they were building golf courses in China. And then I haven't really been paying attention to the issue. But then when came across Ryan and I, you probably hold the record of like emailing with me one of the longest before I even met you.
It's because I live in China.
Because you live in China.
I don't get to DC very often.
So he's Ryan is a photojournalist, and well, he's more than anything. What I love about his, if you see his bio, he kind of drifts and roams through things. He drifts between journalism and roams about China, taking photos. Can I talk about your motorcycle thing?
You can if you'd like.
He'll give you more details, because actually, besides talking about golf courses, you can also ask him about his motorcycle ride with his brother around China, a Guinness World Record,
Yep.
for just gallivanting about, what was the record for?
It was the most kilometers completed in a country without backtracking.
Because there's only, with roads going like this, why the heck would you want to turn back around, right?
Exactly, yes. There was no turning back.
There's no turning. So, and it's going to be actually a discovery program.
Yeah, it should be out by Christmas.
Yeah, so it's like, cool. We'll let everyone know, because I think it's way cool. Because initially I wanted him to talk about that, but I guess he had to kind of wait until the television program comes out. But yeah, but that doesn't, we can still ask you about it, right? The Q&A.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's done a lot of reporting on all different kinds of issues, a lot of cool photos. That's how you guys know. So you actually sent me a package of your photos, and I was like,
I did, yes.
yeah, so it's like that's a sneaky way of getting me to notice you. And yeah, so we've been kind of bouncing back and forth when to do this golf thing, and he arrived last night, leaves early tomorrow. We grabbed him, then grabbed my buddy Tad Ferris. A lot of you know him, a frequent visitor at the China Environment Forum. Whenever we need to know about the law, we call Tad. Tad's over at Holland and Knight. He's a partner with the firm's China team, which I think is actually the largest law firm team that focuses on China environment. If I'm correct.
Yeah, you don't have to be very large to be the largest law firm team that focuses on the environment.
But they actually know, and Tad knows a lot. He's like a walking encyclopedia. So he's going to give us some insights into the background, but also it's also fair play with him to ask, and I will do this too, asking him questions also broader about land development in China. Because while golf is not the big sport in China, those golf courses are going in at a mile a minute.
You'd think.
They're like kudzu, right?
That'll be part of the presentation, is how few golfers there actually are in China.
Yep. Okay, but so you've heard enough of me. So, and these two guys, in the good spirit of China, will be doing a ping pong presentation.
So I'll start. I think it's really important for everyone here to understand what golf course development in China actually looks like. So I'm just going to play a brief audio slideshow of some of my images. And then Tad will go through some of the laws and how that's implemented in China. And then I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about what's actually happening on the ground from some of my last trips there.
Okay.
Cool.
And then you're going to wander around with the mic.
Okay.
So that's a brief visual introduction to kind of what's happening in mostly Hainan province in southern China. And of course, Tad's going to speak now a little bit about some of the laws in China and how golf course development is implicated by that. And then I'm going to come back and walk you through some of those images.
Thanks a lot. Before I even saw the title to that music, I had said, "Wow, comforting yet stressful." As Ryan mentioned, what I'd like to do is sort of give everyone some of the legal background. What controls golf course development in China right now? Because I think, before Jennifer even came to me, I was looking at a lot of the Chinese regulatory programs and saying, wow, here's the law, and here's, okay, they're doing a little well in this area, for example, environmental impact assessment or chemicals control, that kind of thing. But here, I believe it's quite an excellent case study in, fairly extensive law and fairly, let's say, Wild West disregard of the law. In terms of, as we at the Wilson Center programs have looked over the years at various different regulatory systems, water, soil, chemicals, waste, etc. This is one of the more stark examples of, the national government at least, having a very clear statement in terms of what they want to see in terms of golf course development in particular and what's happening on the ground. So with that, sort of a little bit of heads up, I'm going to look, a slide or two on ongoing situation, what's going on right now, the status quo. Ryan will go into that in far more detail. And then look at some of what is the current regulatory framework for golf course construction, and as well as some of the environmental specific issues and laws governing golf course operations. So essentially from 2004 to 2009, we had a massive surge in golf course construction to what is now over 500. I have a link here too, which also highlights another stress in the sort of the regulatory management system for golf courses, which is, here's a link here that you can go to and you can enter the province or special municipality, etc. And you can come up with a map that shows you all the golf courses and you can link on that. So here we have the marketing and tourism aspect or push for golf courses, and shortly we'll talk about the legal limit that's supposed to be imposed or restrictions on golf courses. Most of the golf courses occupy previously cultivated land. There are a number that Ryan will look at that are, in other sensitive areas. A lot of the other issues we see include basically what we in law called ultra-virus approvals, or basically approvals beyond the actual powers of the regulatory authorities. They may decide to approve it, but really, under the law, they should not be approving that. Other situations that you'll see, as Ryan will also provide examples of, are, for instance, what I call calling a horse a carrot, or basically, this is not a golf course, ignore this. It is actually a cheese or a carrot. Basically constructing something, Ryan mentioned a university, getting approval for that university's development when actually it should be, as the primary purpose of the development is a golf course, it should be an approval for a golf course, which obviously they wouldn't do, and I'll explain why soon. Very recently, we had 3 golf course construction violation cases that were announced by and sanctioned, meaning there were penalties issued by the Ministry of Land and Resources, one of the primary national government authorities that regulates this area. During the period December 2009 to 2010, the Sanxia Homing Tourism Real Estate Development Company constructed a golf course and golf court without the relevant approvals and was in violation of, basically the fundamental land use plan. And I'll talk about this circular on suspension of newly constructed golf courses shortly. But there were also, for example, very well-known penalties issued against golf course construction in Hainan, also in Xinjiang, of all places, which is also seeing some more intensive activity of late in terms of construction of golf courses. So those 3 cases, these are also publicly announced. There are a number that are still going through internal penalty setting procedures in China. Just giving you a quick back of the envelope review of the legal issues, or sort of the legal framework for controls on golf course construction. At the very top, at the statute level, we have this land administration law as amended back in 2008. It really sets out the legal framework for land use controls. These are obviously also applicable to golf course construction. For instance, in Article 45, it says expropriation of this basic farmland, land exceeding 35 hectares, basic farmland, and expropriation of any land exceeding 70 hectares requires state council, very high level approval. You'll find, as we've seen this explosion of golf courses, I believe it's extremely rare for any of these folks to get state council approval. To get up to that high a level for approval, not just the local government level, but that high level, requires, of course, and we'll talk about this soon, that they consider national laws. And as you'll see, those national laws generally prohibit this kind of construction. And when you look at land, any land exceeding 70 hectares, you know, it's not uncommon to see 260 or so beyond in terms of hectares for these golf course construction projects. So don't worry about the fine print, these will be available. But, you know, typical, these implementing rules and related regulatory documents have very lengthy titles. We provide the Chinese in case folks want to look up the original. Where they're available online, we've also provided links so you can look at the actual laws. You know, it's not just stuff internal, this is fairly widely available. So, you know, just if you take the key, you know, what do these documents say in key terms? It says, for example, this early one, issued back in '93, clearly states that golf course projects, in principle, shall neither be approved nor granted planning permits, land use, and loans. Now, that was pretty straightforward. But what you found out also, that as we go through these various restrictions, you say, well, how are these entities developed? It's not only just saying, well, we're hiding the fact that this is a golf course. They may have done the old loophole thing. You know, they'll say, haha, it doesn't say you can't lease land. It just says, for instance, you can't acquire the land use rights. So you'll see leasing as a prominent feature in some of these golf course development projects. So we go from '93, then, you know, this is another great case story, and we said it once, almost like a Monty Python, if you watch British humor, Monty Python type of skit, where we said it once, no, we really mean it. Shall I hit you on the head with a hammer? You know, and you'll see it reiterated. You'll see this often, you know, if you follow Chinese law development, you will see, for example, an initial announcement from the ministry, then you'll see an announcement on strengthening implementation. Basically that says, well, it wasn't strong enough the first time, and we really mean it, strengthen it. And then you'll see reiterating or opinions on the importance of strengthening compliance, or some titles such as that. Basically a repetition that shows increased national government concern with the fact that no one's complying, or there's insufficient compliance with this law on the ground. So getting back to this, in '97 you see this circular on further strengthening. You see, well, it wasn't strong enough in terms of compliance in the first place. And this basically said that it's prohibited to take cultivated land, forest land, wasteland, suitable for cultivation, and sell the land use rights. Right here is one of the things that they got around. Sell? Okay, we're just leasing. Of above-mentioned land for golf course construction projects. Okay, move then from '97 to 2003. Land use for construction purposes shall be strictly examined and approved, and land use for golf course projects shall neither be applied for nor approved. That's pretty straightforward. You don't even submit your application. Jump same year, you know, just to really make it clear. This basically says, you know, golf courses under construction shall be suspended or shall not start construction if, one, the construction didn't go through relevant approvals, you know, so, you know, you're okay if you went through relevant approvals. And you can see a lot of folks thinking, wow, how can I show that I've already gone through the relevant approvals? If the proposal and feasibility study for the golf course have been approved, but the land use or construction commencement permit have not been attained, or all the approvals have been obtained, but the project construction has not yet commenced. You know, the detail with this probably provides more opportunity for folks to try to, you know, make arguments at least to get around it, but the goal is really to restrict the development of these golf course projects. Again, the same year, because it seemed that 2004 was a sort of a intense year for golf course related law. The State Council issued a decision that indicated basically we're suspending approvals for land use for golf courses. And this is State Council, the highest level, executive level authority at the national government in China. Not ending there, which obviously shows us that, you know, things weren't yet as they desired them to be on the legal side. They issued this provisional regulations on promoting industrial structure adjustment. You know, what the heck is that? Never mind, it also had relevance for the golf course area because the catalog issued along with these decisions classified golf course projects into the restricted category. You know, there are many Chinese regulatory programs that have sort of 3 levels of regulatory classification. One might be prohibited, banned, don't bother, don't even come here. Next is restricted. They could make a case-by-case decision. You may not get approved, but you could if you follow certain intensive procedures. And then there might be, you know, another category which is, you know, something that is assumed that will be approved and the application provisions are less stringent. Well, anyways, this is in the restricted category. In parts pursuant to Article 18 of these provisional regulations, it's prohibited to invest in new projects in the restricted category. So this sort of doesn't conform to what is the typical Chinese approach of prohibited, restricted, sort of automatic approval. This just says very clearly, sorry, you're in the restricted category, we don't want you. We don't want this kind of project. So you're not supposed to approve, record, meaning file with the government for record-keeping purposes. You're not supposed to get loans for these projects. The departments of land management, city planning, construction, environmental protection, quality inspection, fire protection, customs. So basically all the government bodies are not supposed to help you with these projects. Now, as we've seen, when we look at Ryan's pictures, maybe that means that all of these are just not non-compliant all around if no one's supposed to help them. But at least this State Council decision set out yet again in 2005 the fact that they wanted these projects to cease in terms of development. Move up again another year, so here's 2006. Okay, let's be clearer. Golf course projects are included in the prohibited catalog. Restricted wasn't clear enough. So in accordance with Article 3, land use resource departments at various levels and the investment management department, meaning those approving these investment projects, shall not approve any of the projects listed in the prohibited catalog. So they're not approved, fairly clear. Jump ahead, 2007, it seems to now be an annual issue. We're getting new laws. Circular concerning the National Land Use Plan for the year 2000. Ministry of Land and Resources. It emphasizes the importance of implementing the regulation concerning prohibited catalog, this one, restricted catalog. Restates that land use for golf course projects is strictly prohibited. So this is one of those, we really, really meant it kind of laws. Not to disparage them, I'm just saying that this, you know, you can't get more clear. This is, an intensification of purpose over time. So 2007, 2008, things are still developing. 2009, Ministry of Land and Resources outlines 4 principles for drafting management measures for transfers of rural land for construction purposes, one of which is to prohibit use of rural collective land for constructing golf courses. So, sometimes you have to get specific, very specific. Also in 2009, another circular controlling land use for construction purposes and improving use of approved land. Again, basically requiring land use resource management departments at the various levels in the government to take actions to investigate and prosecute illegal construction of golf courses in violation of law. So a lot of those cases, the ones that I mentioned at the beginning, this was one of the triggers that pushed them to come up with some actual enforcement actions. And then also in 2009, more detailed circular on investigations of golf course construction, which really was issued by all of the major national authorities that deal with these kind of development projects, including the General Administration of Sport and National Tourism Administration. It required that these local governments, as well as these authorities, the line agencies basically, strictly comply with requirements indicating a circular on suspension of newly constructed golf courses and continuously suspend approvals for construction of golf courses until the issuance of relevant new policies. Further, the circular specifies that golf courses constructed or under the construction with 9 or more holes or an area of over 500 mu are targets for the investigation. 1 mu is about 660 square meters. The investigation summary report, per this, they asked that the local governments submit an summary of their investigations. It was supposed to be submitted by November 30, 2009. And the 2010 case that I mentioned was also, in part, a result of these investigation requirements. So no surprise. I mean, none of this I didn't do in the time available. I didn't do an actual data survey in terms of environmental impacts, but a lot of us are at least sensitized to some of the environmental issues associated with golf courses. Many of these are the reason that the Ministry of Environmental Protection in China, has categorized golf course construction where it is, if it were approved, and there are some that are approved that were in operation early on, as requiring the highest level or most stringent level of environmental impact assessment. So water resources, high consumption. One media source I looked at said there are levels 11 times average daily water consumption that are used. Negative impacts on water quality of ground and surface water, increased wastewater discharge, air pollution caused by volatilization of the various pesticides, noise, which you wouldn't normally think of, but also there are intensive irrigation pumping stations at many of these golf courses that also create noise impacts to the area. And there are a number of natural resource and other issues as well, but I wanted to take the very short time left to give you sort of a back of the envelope on the environmental laws that apply. And this is, aside from the fact that they're restricted or banned in many cases, where they are ongoing, there are numerous environmental laws that apply, including the Environmental Impact Assessment Law, as well as the statute level, also the Environmental Protection Law, which specifies that governments, strengthen agricultural environmental protection by promoting rational application of fertilizers, pesticides, and plant growth hormones, as well as facilities for the control of pollution. The Water Pollution Prevention Control Law, looking at the use of fertilizers and pesticides in particular, as well as controlling the discharge of wastewater, and also prohibiting the construction, renovation, or enlargement of inside drinking water reserves of any construction project irrelevant to the maintenance of that water supply. Regulations on nature protection zones. Many of these, obviously, they'd like to seek for construction a lot of fairly, attractive environments, which may be, depending on the location, within nature protection zones, as well as, we know, that, it is quite rare to see such vast expanses of grass in natural green area. There are a lot of pesticides, I would say, as well as fertilizers that are applied to maintain that. So that's my back of the envelope for the beginning. Against that, let's say, foundation, I'll let Ryan construct a little more.
Let me test, and also the 12th five-year plan is they finally put some targets on nitrogen and phosphorus, which would include kind of the runoff from pesticides, right? So
sure, and also under that plan and the National People's Congress, I've shortened, the National People's Congress legislative plan that's upcoming, I think one of the laws that will, or two of the laws that will probably be very relevant to golf course construction will be, one, the Soil Environmental Protection Law that they're working on now, as well as the Water resource environmental protection law that is also being developed now.
Well, this is good, and we can talk in the Q&A because the whole issue of soil pollution, there's a lot of backstory on that. I mean, China did a 3-year survey of soil contamination
And groundwater.
and groundwater, and it never was fully released. So, it's kind of a scary, must be scary stuff. But now we're going to transport ourselves to Hainan Island.
Yes. I'm going to speak a little bit about Hainan Island because about a year and a half ago, I got to spend 3 weeks there working for the Financial Times Weekend magazine. And this is what I do. I'm a photographer, and I visit places around China. I live full-time in Shanghai. And what I do is I travel around China pulling stories out of China on various subjects for the Western media. I work for the New York Times, Time, and Newsweek. And I'm from Toronto, Canada. And I moved to China in 2002, and I've basically been there full-time since. And I work for kind of all the major US publications, like Newsweek. And Hainan there is just at the bottom, that lovely little blue one in the middle at the bottom. And it's a tropical island. Many people in China call it the Chinese version of Hawaii. It's gorgeous, and I've been there many times. And that's a kind of, this is a little bit closer of a look at where Hainan is. Now, the two areas of interest are down here in Sanya, which is down in the bottom. That's a very built-up tourism area. And then, of course, in the north, in the center area, that's Haikou. That's the provincial capital. And also down here is Wanning. And that's where a lot of the new developments are happening, and they're actually going to be building an international airport there. So, wanted to just kind of give a brief outline of what golf is. So you have the United States, #1 world economy, around 300 million people, 20,000 golf courses in the United States, roughly. Cost per round, average, $40 US. And they say about 9% of the US population has golfed at least once per year. That's kind of what makes you a golfer, although we all know it doesn't. Even if you golf 100 times a year, you can still struggle. Japan, world's 3rd largest economy, 130 million people, 2,400 golf courses. Cost per round, $75. And again, around 8 to 10% of the population are considered to be once a year or more golfers. China, just recently the world's 2nd largest economy, about 1.4 billion people, 500 golf courses. Average cost per round, $120. Significantly more than in both the United States and Japan. And this is my favorite statistic. Statistically, 0% of the Chinese population golf. Obviously because the population is so large. And then Hainan Island. Hainan Island, that tropical Hawaiian island in the bottom, in the south, it ranks number 21 within the Chinese provinces as having a 21 largest economy. The island has a population of 8 million people, and the island has 200 plus golf courses. Almost half of all of China's golf courses are in Hainan Island. And Hainan Island has a premium, and people pay an average of $180 US per round. And again, 0% of the people on Hainan Island golf. This is just outside of Haikou, the provincial capital, and this is a driving range. I don't know, can you guys see that okay? Is the light, is it a bit too bright? So this is kind of a typical scene. You get, there's a lot of driving range developments in China, and this is, your typical kind of Chinese golfer, half on the phone, half golfing, wearing shorts, and you can see there's people down the right side golfing behind them. And, I think what's important to know here is that golfing in China is very upmarket. You can see the lady to the left is like a personal caddy. When you come to a driving range, you actually get your own personal caddy at the driving range. And they clean off the balls for you. They prepare the balls for you. They prepare drinks for you. They clean off your clubs, even though you're hitting off of turf. They'll hold your mobile phone for you so you can swing. All these types of things. It's a real luxury experience, much more so than I think in North America, where you can get a bunch of friends going out and hitting at the driving range. So Hainan Island, China's southernmost province, It's 13,000 square miles. Its first inhabitants were supposed to be migrated from China 7,000 years ago. And it wasn't really populated by kind of Han majority until 12,000 AD, and it was mainly pirates and banished government officials. And that's really important to know because Hainan actually wasn't given provincial status until 1988. And when people talk about the Wild West of China, Hainan Island is it. There's very little legal framework. There's very little government framework. People just seem to do what they want when they want. And it's important to know that that's kind of been ingrained in their history. They've never had a strong central government. They've never had a strong provincial government. They've always been kind of too far away from Beijing for anyone to really care what's going on. And that leads to this kind of rampant law breaking that Tad indicated earlier about how they came up with 10 laws in a row, basically having to say the same things over a span of 15 years. Golf ambitions in China. Golf was officially banned when Chairman Mao took power in 1949. But the first modern golf course was built in 1984. And now there's around 500 or so courses, one course for every 2 million people. And why is Hainan booming? Tad and I were just speaking about this earlier. It's my understanding that building golf courses was banned. Obviously, we saw all of those rules that Tad pointed out going back to 1994. But golf courses were pretty much banned by 2004, 2005, 2008, 2009. But Hainan seems to have some kind of exemption, and Tad and I were trying to understand exactly where this comes from, and we both haven't been able to figure it out. But golf course development in Hainan Island is booming. And there's a rumor that they already have over 200 courses. And one of the reasons for this potential exemption that we can't seem to put our finger on is because of tourism development. The Beijing government and the Hainan government have somehow teamed up to try to make Hainan Island Asia's biggest golf destination. And you can see this in China, where I live, where you see newspaper magazines or newspaper advertisements, magazine advertisements, all kinds of advertisements telling people to go golfing in Hainan. And when you actually go to Hainan, it's full of Koreans, Japanese, and tons of Russians. There's direct flights from Vladivostok in eastern Russia to Hainan Island, and a lot of them are going for golf. We talked earlier about the land and water use. Hainan Island is a volcanic island. It's a fragile tropical ecosystem, and you'll see this in some of my imagery. And it also has a lot of sand dunes along the coast. So it's really a gorgeous, gorgeous spot. And all this development is obviously changing traditional ways of life. Property development is a huge reason why these courses are getting developed. A lot of people who develop golf courses, and I've spoken to many of them, do not make a profit at all from selling golf memberships. How do they make profits? The villas that go on the golf. Golf course development in China is very much a property play. And some of the villas on some of these golf courses can go for $1 million or more. And you can see here, they're built in all kinds of various styles, whether it's a North American kind of mansion or whether it's like a Spanish hacienda. You know, they come across all these different cultural designs and architecture to try to make it more attractive to potential investors. And this particular picture is from the Clearwater Bay development, which is on the southeast corner of Hainan Island. The future of golf in China is very strange. There's no youth programs and no school programs. So you're getting rapid golf course development in China with no grassroots development for potential, potential professionals or growing the sport. And all of the courses are private. There are officially, as of last year, I believe, there were no public golf courses in China catering to, lower-end players or child development. So it's basically a game for the rich, as the average cost is $120. Statistically, there's 1/10 of a hectare of farmland per person in China. Golf courses use up at least 50 hectares. And golf courses use up 3,000 cubic meters of water every day. An interesting story is that Mission Hills, which is being developed in Hainan Island as an 18-course mega development just south of Haikou. is actually being built in a tropical rainforest that's known as the Lung of Hainan, because, and it's amazing what's happening there. I have a lot of imagery. So you get a competition of resources between the local people who are still living on the land, as all of this land being used for golf courses is fertile. And then the property developers who are interested in selling million-dollar villas. And of course, they've just allowed golf into the Olympics in 2016. So now, finally, China's starting to promote golf in China at the younger ages, and they are starting to bring about grassroots programs. But it's mainly just in a response to trying to win gold medals. This image is quite nice. It's from Wanning, and Wanning is on the southeast coast of Hainan Island, and it shows kind of a traditional fishing culture that exists there. And these fishermen have already been asked to move from this area 5 times, and this was in 2010 when I visited. And the reason is because CITIC Pacific, which is a large government-attached kind of investment group, bought 35 square miles of prime coastal land, of which this is part of, to develop a tourism center with multiple golf courses, 5-star hotels, restaurants, and the whole spiel. And which is happening all over China in some ways, but here it's happening, and you can see how this traditional way of life is being changed. These fishermen are no longer allowed to farm here, and they're kind of going against the rules of the developers by still fishing on this land. Again, fishermen collecting their daily catch. Part of my ongoing documentation of this issue is not only to develop, to photograph the development of the golf courses, but also the local communities around the golf courses and how they're being affected. This is an excellent example. Hainan Island is a volcanic island, and it's famous. I say that funny because that's the way most Chinese people say, oh, it's very famous for these homes. And these traditional villages built entirely out of volcanic rock. And they're a big tourism play. A lot of people visit Hainan Island to visit these gorgeous, gorgeous villages, and it's mostly elderly people who live there. A lot of the young have gone off to try to make lives for themselves in the cities. And a lot of these villages are being destroyed for the development of these golf courses without a real dialogue about how some of these places might be preserved. Now, without being overly negative, there is actually a lot of positive things that can come out of building a golf course in Hainan Island. And I don't want you to think I'm all on the negative side. And here's a positive example. Behind me, you see a man, and what he's doing is he's a fish farmer. And you get this a lot in China, where people dig out land, fill it with water, put in fish, and then feed the fish, and then they collect the fish and sell them. But what happens is that this bit of land, which never kind of has any inflow or outflow of water, becomes very stale and stagnant. And actually, a lot of the fishes that are bred in these kinds of fish farms end up being diseased or quite unhealthy. And actually, this kind of fish farming just rapes the land, so to speak. It's really unhealthy. And what they've done in this particular area near Wanning was they came in and they actually got rid of all the fish farmers. And what they've done is they've recultivated the land and built up a park around their golf course. And a lot of the local people have said a lot of the birds and traditional wildlife have actually come back that had disappeared about 10 to 15 years ago when the fish farms started to take over. Mission Hills, Hainan. We all know perhaps maybe Mission Hills in Shenzhen, which is on the border of Hong Kong. And this is termed as being the world's largest golf course. And they hold a big tournament there every year, and Tiger Woods was there a few years ago, and it attracts a lot of the big players. And this is a tropical rainforest where they're building Mission Hills, Hainan Island, which I mentioned earlier as being an 18-hole mega project. Sorry, not an 18-hole, an 18-course mega project. That's 18 18-hole golf courses. And what they're doing is they're just completely tearing up the tropical landscape. So it's quite funny when you see, as Tad mentioned earlier, that there's all these rules and restrictions about building golf courses, and yet someone can build 18-hole golf courses without anyone seeming to notice or care. And these bulldozers just kind of come in and clear all the land right out. This is also just outside of Wanning. It's a course called the Dunes. And that's kind of a typical example of what you'd see. Stunning grass, well-watered, well-cultivated. It's always funny, you know, in North America, where you don't see a lot of labor-intensive jobs, you always end up seeing like at least 5 or 6 or 8 people in one sand dune in China, all, you know, combing the grass down or clipping the grass along the side. So golf course development is labor-intensive in China, and a lot of these people used to live on the land that the golf course is now on. So one of the ways they try to avoid local unrest, and there is local unrest, and we'll get into that in a few minutes, is to give them jobs maintaining the course. And it's wrong to think that it can't be beautiful. That might be a little bit too bright at the moment, but you can see it's a sunset with the ocean on the left. And Tad mentioned earlier that a lot of these golf courses are being developed in some of the most beautiful places in China. They are looking for, you know, wildlife areas or areas of natural beauty, areas that are otherwise protected by the government. There was a great story when I was in Hainan Island. We met up with these nature protection group, and they had their own national park. It was very small, but it was still a national park of tropical rainforest. And we went in and talked to these guys, and we wanted to know if anyone had come to approach them about building a golf course. And they said, yes, actually some people had. And we asked them what they thought of that, and they thought it was going to be great, because they wanted to build an 18-hole golf course right in the middle of their national park. And that would be a way where they could receive some fees for the land, because this national park was unbelievably underfunded. And the people, and there was like a group of 3 guys sitting around a desk playing cards with one Volkswagen Santana outside, and they were kind of in charge of the entire national park. But they weren't getting any funding from the government. There was no way of kind of watching what was going on within the national park. There was no tourism in the national park. So they were basically looking at ways of trying to develop their national park so that people could come and see, and that they could generate, you know, some income. And golf was going to be kind of their way out. This is also the Dunes golf course in Wanning, and here you can see a young man trying to line up one of the holes. And you can see these guys, they're all dressed in kind of military fatigues of some way, shape, or form. This one's different. This is, we talked about earlier about calling a carrot cheese or calling a dog a cat. This is Dragon's Valley, also in Hainan Island. This is quite close to Sanya. And this course is being developed as a university campus. And I found that funny. So what you have is, you've got an 18-hole golf course surrounded by $1 million villas. And then down in this one little corner, you've got this like small building that actually wasn't even finished being constructed. And that was going to be the university campus for some business school that was mildly associated to Sanya. And that was how they were able to get around the regulations to build that golf course. And again, I think this sets the world record for the most people in one sand dune. And here we have the holdouts. Anytime there's land appropriation in China, it's never a simple issue. In most cases, the people who live on the land don't own the land. And in recent years, the government has made concessions whereby the people who live on the land can rent out the land to corporations. And this has been actually a positive influence in Fujian province, where farmers are renting out their land to larger companies that are cultivating bamboo. And they're using bamboo for everything from chopsticks to furniture. And then the farmers get to still work on their land, and they actually get paid a wage by the bamboo company. So that's kind of one of the positive aspects. But down here on the golf courses, a lot of people aren't happy with the amount of money they're being offered to get off the land. No one really knows what compensation's offered. No one really knows what the land is supposedly worth. But there's always people who are upset with the value. And this woman was holding out. Her and her whole family were squatting, basically. And bulldozers came in mostly from the local government, who have a real interest in selling that land. And they came in and they destroyed people's homes. And there's fighting. It's violent. It's physical. They come in. They destroy cars. They destroy homes. They intimidate, and all in the name of progress, so to speak. So that's my presentation about what the golf landscape in Hainan Island looks like. And Tad gave a great example of just how difficult this seems to have been to enforce, with the 9+ laws over 14 years or something like this. So you can see that on the ground, the laws are not affecting anything. So I guess, would you like to open up to questions?
Yeah. Why
Great.
don't you come and have a seat? Why don't you put up a pretty picture in the background
A pretty picture.
Yes.
so we can all pretend we're golfing?
And also, I mean, Hainan is an interesting example. We have 200+ golf courses there, but there has been some kind of background approval of some of that plan, and we're still digging, so we'll report to everyone when we find out more. But it still comes in the face, and you can see how challenging this is, of everything from the state council down in terms of prohibitions. So, ideally, you'd say, well, or logically, you'd say, well, if you wanted to make an exception for Hainan, you should get that approved all the way up so that people would clearly understand, okay, Hainan, you want to make it a national tourism development zone, that you're giving it a clear exemption.
Yeah.
But apparently, given interprovincial and other politics in China, that might be a little bit sensitive to get that clear of an exception for Hainan.
I think
they could do a golf competition. Whoever wins can.
I think one of the important things to understand is how government officials are actually ranked in China as far as their careers go. They're not ranked on, they're basically ranked on GDP growth, population stability, and making sure that there's no kind of uprisings. And within those limits, they control the banks. They are the government. They control the courts, and they control the media. So whatever they can control to increase GDP growth and increase tourism and keep the population stable, they're going to do whatever they can. And golf course development is one of the kind of easy outs, because it has a property element to it that boosts the GDP growth through the roof, and that makes them look good, so that they can then move up from the county level to the provincial level, and from the provincial level to the central government level, and which is what every career politician wants. So it's very much a self-feeding prophecy, or a vicious circle, where people are doing this to benefit themselves and their counties.
Here's a quote I found from the Chinese press that gives you a hint of how complicated this can be. Li Jianqin, head of Law Enforcement and Supervision Department of the Ministry of Land and Resources, warned that an approved plan to build golf courses in Hainan as it becomes a global resort does not mean others can ignore the ban.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, Helen, you had a question? There's the mic, yeah.
Well, you want to introduce you?
Yeah, say who you are.
Helen Raphael, Resources for the Future. I have 2 quick comments and 2 quick questions, so I won't be monopolizing it, even though I have 4 things on my.
That's okay.
One is when I was working in Indonesia 10 years ago, 20 years ago. My God, I'm getting
Time
old.
flies for you.
In 1991, right, 20 years ago, there was a golf course being built outside of Jakarta, and there was a lot of local commotion against it and picketing against the golf course. So it was a similar situation from what you're talking about there. And I have no idea about the expansion of golf course production in Indonesia, but it might be a similar sort of situation. My second quick comment is that a week from Friday, on the 29th, April 29th, Cato, of all institutions, is having a noontime event on land rights in China. And I don't know whether, Tad, are you one of the speakers there?
No.
I didn't notice, but it might be interesting for you. Okay, 2 quick questions. One is Hainan well watered by the monsoon rains?
No, there's actually pretty intensive desertification concerns in Hainan. I think the topography, correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of mountainous down to the ocean.
Everything slides right out to the ocean.
Deforestation and
But doesn't that make
water conservation
the
are big issues there.
mountainsides on the way to the ocean well-watered? No? Okay.
Not as much as you would think.
Yeah, there's very few lakes. Actually, I believe there's almost no lakes in Hainan Island, and there's no way of, I think they're trying to find ways of trapping that
Okay.
water.
Well, then my other question has to do with agriculture, because you were talking about displacement of agriculture. And number one, watering and putting fertilizers and pesticides on grass, isn't that sort of equivalent to growing crops, so that there isn't any more of an environmental problem having golf courses as opposed to having farms? And then aren't the displaced people who have to give up their farms, even if they don't receive very much, going to have enormous new jobs servicing the tourist industry?
Well, I can do the bit about the jobs. I think that you're dealing with farmers, some of which are illiterate, some of which have zero educational background, and they're not qualified to deal with directly with tourists in the tourism industry. So if they do leave their land, and of course farmers in China have a very emotional attachment. A lot of their identity is attached to that land. A lot of them actually end up squatting in the cities nearby because they're kind of so distraught. And don't forget too, it's only the younger people who lose their land that would even have a chance to work 12 hours a day on a golf course, picking all the little grass and doing all the cutting and cleaning up the sand traps. And what about the older generation? Now they're landless in many ways, and the compensation has never always seemed to be enough.
I mean, it's basically, we see similar kind of arguments too, like with even dam construction. I mean, because the land is your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You may send your insurance, you may send all your kids to the city, but ultimately,
You can always
like
come
as the
back.
economy, like as the even though China didn't suffer as much, there were a lot of people, as the recession came and some businesses closed in Guangdong, for example, a lot of young people went back to the farm because there's still survival back there. And so when you take away people's land, there's a sense, there's no healthcare in rural areas. These people are really literally left high and dry.
Yeah.
So that I think that's a big challenge.
I don't think they're pleased that their land's being taken and that they now have a grand opportunity to work for a golf course. I think that would be mistaken.
Okay. You said something about, as a tourist attraction, the homes that the older people are living in.
Yes, the volcanic rock villages.
Yes. Isn't that something that then should be preserved and perhaps will be preserved?
You would think so, but they're not. Just in select areas where the government has kind of said,
Often, yeah, just
yeah.
like hutong,
Hutongs,
some of them might be considered wonderful, but others will say, no, I want something new and modern. Why would we want these?
and then they
And
run.
only too late, unfortunately, sometimes the folks say, well, we should have saved some of those. Just like in DC, of all places.
Yeah.
Many things were not preserved.
You had another comment?
I just wanted to say also too that when Chinese do kind of preserve these areas, their idea of preservation is massive parking lot, 300 buses per day, full of 100 tourists each, and they come in and they completely kind of take over that little village, and a lot of its authenticity is kind of destroyed. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Bob Kenny, Environmental Protection Agency. I'm just wondering if Tad could talk a little bit about what's going on with the soil protection law.
Oh, the soil conservation law? Well, they set it up at the National People's Congress in terms of they've got the mandate now. The Ministry of Environmental Protection has wanted to develop this law for quite a number of years now. Indeed, the last time they tried to get it approved for drafting, among other things, the SARS epidemic and other priorities, pushed it off the legislative agenda. Obviously not permanently, but at that time they said, oh, let's just issue some ministry laws, including laws that require monitoring of the soil at manufacturing sites that are relocated or shut down, that kind of thing. They then came up with a few more detailed opinions, a few years later that said, well, basically you need to do your due diligence, and here's how you do it. You don't have to yet, but you should file it with the local environmental authorities. And people saw that as okay, sort of creeping slowly towards basically a historical soil contamination type regulatory program. So right now they're grappling with the soil contamination law and its full-blown nature within the Congress. It may take some time, however, for them to get around certain issues, among the more contentious being the concept of liability for past contamination. In other words, your company, spilled something on the soil years ago, maybe that company does not exist now. How do you address that kind of responsibility in the law? I remember back in the 90s, Chinese Congress had actually set up an ad hoc committee to study the U.S. Superfund or historical soil contamination, groundwater contamination
Probably scared
program.
them.
At the time, they said, look, our legal system, is not one that will support, lawsuits and the idea of retroactive liability. So let's study this some more. Well, it looks like now they're having to really deal with that issue. And we'll be monitoring that and perhaps have another Woodrow Wilson Center program as they start putting together their first draft.
So we can talk dirt with Tad. More dirt. Do we know the soil?
Trash and dirt.
Yeah,
That's what
he
we
comes
talk
and does
about a lot.
trash. He does garbage meetings for me too. That's why golf. This is like a real kind of upswing for our meeting.
Yeah, this is
topic,
different.
right? For the soil contamination study, that is kind of
The one that
came
did
and went.
back in 2007.
Yeah,
It was actually a
what were some
nationwide
highlights that
survey
you
of
found out?
pollution sources, sort of where are we getting pollutants. Well, the statistics are still spread among various of the research institutes and haven't been publicly released, but there are a number of issues of concern that arose. One is that the groundwater contamination is much, much higher. Not only do you have depleted groundwater resources, no surprise, but somewhat as a result of that, as well as with, a lack of, it's not an easy task, but a lack of remediation of groundwater resources that have been contaminated. There's high concentrations of pollutants in the remaining groundwater throughout China. And that continues to be an issue. It's something that if you talk to folks that just do general industrial development work in China, you can easily find examples of. For example, it's not easy to find sources of groundwater that are even sufficient or appropriately clean for industrial operations, let alone for residential use. So this is something that one of the things that's driving the soil contamination law development. It's sort of an issue that's always, it's like in, an unorganized office. It's in that pile over there, and you really know it's a big problem, and you don't want to deal with it because it's so difficult to tackle. Well, they finally need to tackle that issue.
But we are hearing stats. I mean, like, the government, Chinese government, saying that 10% of their rice is contaminated with cadmium.
Yeah, heavy metals is again looming large in the media. Cadmium, blood, lead levels. We saw a lot of reports. The ones that were released were a lot about blood lead levels in children. Something that's obviously of great concern to everyone, but
We're actually
causing a
going
lot of notice. One of the interesting things, though, is that a lot of the attention tends to be focused on the electronics industry because a lot of the products that are so popular, cell phones and other type, everything that one uses in modern life, contains some elements of that. Yes, they do have a European equivalent to a restricted hazardous substance restriction law, or ROS law as they often call it, but dealing with the historical stuff, the things that are already in the ground. I think it's not just an issue of what electronics have gone there, but other sources of that pollution as well. Interesting from a standpoint too, since my wife is also an environmental lawyer, that just sort of the history from Japan as well with dealing with Itai disease from cadmium poisoning, et cetera. These sensitivities will probably loom larger as we proceed in China and as different contaminations are of concern. But obviously cadmium contamination of rice is catches a lot of attention. And as the Ministry of Environmental Protection put it when I spoke to them about it, they said, yes, this is very high on our agenda to focus on this issue.
Yeah, we're actually going to do a heavy metal, not that kind, but heavy metal meeting on June 16th, actually, because I've been, but it's actually been hard to find, organizations that are really doing this work in China, that are trying to get the data and the numbers. So, but we're going to be there, so you should be there too. We have a question in the back.
Yes, Ralph Winnie with the Eurasian Business Coalition, and this question is for Tad. When you have clients that want to do real estate property development in China / tourism and leisure, how supportive have you found the Tourism Bureau to be in helping your clients get in to China to locate potential projects, work with the villagers, get the necessary permits, et cetera?
I haven't worked with the tourism folks directly. I have heard that they're of varying support, but generally supportive. But again, I come in usually on the environmental approvals side, so I get a different angle for everything. I'm usually the one saying, watch out for this aspect. This is restricted, and that nature. But I'm usually not the one that deals directly with the tourism folks. Sort of the initial foray into getting into the country. They're usually very aggressive, especially at the local level. It gets conservative as you move up the line. So it depends on where your first contact is as well. If you start national and then go local, it'll almost be schizophrenic in the approach.
Can you do the mic, because it's webcast, sorry.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is I'm involved in tourism and leisure in China, so it's been a very interesting experience being over there and working with the Chinese.
Have you found it mercurial?
I've actually enjoyed dealing with the Chinese, working with the villagers and the government officials. Everyone seems to be very supportive of promoting tourism and leisure, especially if it's going to help their people.
Oh, certainly. I think it's overall a policy goal. But when you get into the nitty-gritty, sometimes with the national officials, their line will be much, you can just see from the policy, especially if you need things in writing, it will be extremely conservative. But
I have a good partner there on the ground, so that makes all the difference.
definitely.
One thing his question made me think of, with these golf courses, as you've been gallivanting around looking at them, is there international investment in these courses, or is it predominantly just, because you said there are a lot of Japanese, Koreans, Russians going there.
There are a lot of international golfers golfing in China, but most of the investment is domestic or from Hong Kong or Taiwan. But from my knowledge, nothing outside of that region. Okay. Some of the big benefactors are actually the golf course designers and the people who are hired by these Chinese property development groups to actually go in and design the courses. And they're mainly based in the United States.
That would make sense.
Yeah, so they're getting, and some of these people I've met, and they said, if you're not doing business in China, you're out of business.
Yeah.
Down front here, Dan.
Hi, Dan Yi from Sinotech Automobile. I have a question regarding these golf courses. So from what I hear, there's a extremely small population of golfers, yet population is growing. So their profit model is basically selling real estate. So are you saying most of these golf courses lie vacant or
Losing money.
losing money? So basically just no one's on the golf course. They're just selling the real estate around.
Yeah, I think that if you build a golf course and you can surround it with $1 million villas, you're going to make a lot of money. It doesn't matter if anyone golfs or not. But everyone in China wants to live in a nice big house with a green front yard, which is why so many people are coming to North America to live that kind of dream. But a lot of people are buying second homes in Hainan Island specifically to have that kind of space and to live the winters, actually. You know, that same kind of thing where North Americans in the Northeast and in Canada, where I'm from, they go down to Florida and they have a big home and lots of grass. Well, they're doing that in Hainan Island as well.
So is that model work in northern China? I mean, how does the golf course get developed in Beijing? I mean, I can't imagine anybody want to live in Beijing.
Well, there's a lot of people who want to live in Beijing, and I believe that the golf courses in and around Beijing are also big real estate plays. In secondary cities, I'm not too sure what the play is, but definitely in the warmer climates or in the more attractive parts of China, they're big real estate plays. So, just to introduce you to this image behind me, I put that up for a reason. That's about that golf course is about 2 hours west of Shanghai in Zhejiang province, and it was in 2010 that the government shut that golf course down as part of some of the regulations that Tad was talking about earlier. And it's funny to realize that they made a big kind of PR posturing about shutting down this golf course, about kind of communist ideals and you know, giving the land back to the farmers. So when this kind of came out in the Chinese media, I went over about 2 weeks after just to see what it looked like. And you can see that they left the greens pretty much intact and just ripped up the fairways. But in another picture, they were actually putting in water piping systems down the fairways and putting in basically a sprinkler system. So one could say from that they had planned to do maintenance on that golf course originally and tear up the fairways to put in a sprinkler system. And they used the government closing down that golf course as a way to try to make a media event, like the government was looking out for the rights of the little people, so to speak. And but as you can see, the golf course is being dug up, but the most kind of expensive parts of building the golf course, the greens, were left intact.
So is it a functioning course today, do you know?
I haven't been back, but it's definitely on my list of places to return to.
Pete's got a question, sorry.
Peter Marsters, program assistant here. What is the big difference between the golf courses that do get shut down and the ones that are not shut down? I mean, is it regional, or is it just personal relationship of the owners, or what?
There's no way of knowing what happens with the back dealings in the back offices and who gets, you know, where the connections lie, where the guanxi lies. No one knows. It's almost, from an outsider looking in, it's just unbelievably random.
Okay, how about Julian? So nice to see you.
Hello, Julian Wong, DOE. Just to follow up on Dan's question on the business model. So I guess implicit in that business model of selling villas around a golf course is the assumption that golf courses somehow enhance the value of villas. And I guess I wonder if, even though it's not in use, somehow the building of golf courses enhances the property value of villas. If that could be, the enhancing of the villas could be done in a more sustainable way. So like, instead of having golf courses that require, first you deforest the land and then you add a ton of pesticides and pipe in a ton of purified water, instead of doing that, could you just sort of like, create a park or something that strives to maintain the existing ecosystem instead of trying to completely alter it in a man-made fashion? Would that, be able to enhance the value of the villas? And so could that be a viable alternative model?
I think it could be, and you can definitely visit some golf courses that do have public space, so to speak, as a way of kind of getting the regulations passed. And of course, villas are valuable outside of golf courses. We've seen that in the suburbs of Shanghai and Beijing and Shenzhen, where villa communities pop up and the prices are massive, $2, $3, $4 million US per home. But I think what really is interesting about this is that the people who develop the golf courses, the people who are the property developers, the government officials that sign off on these projects, they love to golf. And what you get is that kind of egoism of, I just built my own private golf course. And then they go out golfing with their friends, and there's not very many people there, and who knows, maybe it lasts 5 years, maybe it lasts 2 years. Maybe the villas get sold, maybe they don't, but it's basically just almost for private use. You just do not see a lot of general public people out there golfing. And I think that there's an element of that there. And of course, it would be great to create, villas with public parks, but no one wants to live next to, a public park, so to speak, because you just don't know what's going to happen there. Who's going to use that land? How is it going to get used? But the idea of living in a private gated community with an empty golf course next by kind of gives you some bit of exclusivity. And I believe that the Chinese market loves exclusivity.
This is the map that I had on my PowerPoint. This is the Beijing map. You can go there and you can search various provinces, etc., to go find the golf courses, so that it is accessible to find out where they are in the various provinces. But this shows the Beijing area.
All the little red characters, that's the name of the golf courses. And Beijing, Beijing just went through severe drought again this year, but these courses are still doing okay.
I'm not sure of each one of them.
Yeah.
No, some of them are doing well, but others are doing less, and they are being forced. The courses that already exist are being forced, to become more effective at recycling their water. But still, their water use is massive.
But see, it's funny to me thinking that if they're actually banned, are there regulations? I wouldn't be surprised if there are regulations requiring recycling of water at golf courses.
Yeah, there are,
Okay.
and some, and it's just like everything else. Some things are followed, and
If they got an environmental impact statement, it would all be set out in there, what they had to do,
Right.
usually fairly.
but who knows what's being followed and what practices aren't being followed, and whether there's any kind of implications for people that decide not to follow the law. I mean, it's
Yeah, this is
it's a cowboy show.
At best, it's kind of an awkward situation where you have so much law that's focused on restricting it. Obviously, there's some deal, apparently, or regulatory approach cut with Hainan, but still, as these develop, there's either going to be pressure to be clearer where the law is concerned, so that they can bring these into the
Fold.
approved as opposed to informal area, as we sometimes call it.
But this is but one little piece, and if I was smart, there's probably a golf pun I could have used here, of just a larger trend of just land grabs, right? Throughout China. Okay, so I've got a question there.
Hi, Sherry Liang from American University. My question is regarding biodiversity conservation, and I was wondering if there's any movement or studies being done currently on these lands where they're clearing rainforests. Are they doing any sort of biodiversity assessments, whether it's in the environmental impact statements or anything of the sort?
Well, it would be part of the EIA process, as well as depending on if you're in a nature reserve, but that's all assuming you're following relevant laws, and if you're also allowed to develop in the first place. If you're going through a more I hate to use this word sometimes, but the informal, in other words, basically you're not strictly adhering the law, or you're taking an approach that isn't fully, let's say, considerate of all the relevant regulations, I would assume be done. Do you have any input on this?
I think that the more beautiful a place is, the more someone wants to put a golf course there. And whether it's a tropical rainforest or a bamboo, forest in Fujian province or in Zhejiang province or wherever, people want to develop there and enjoy that space, because there's an idea of not being able to necessarily enjoy it in its natural state. And there's this old kind of communist kind of way of thinking where, man has to dominate nature. And I think that still exists in the way people are developing land in China today. And I don't think they do studies or really care too much before the fact. It's only afterwards where people say, wow, we just lost a lot of a specific kind of bird or something. And there's always one or two people that are trying to raise this kind of awareness, but they get stamped out pretty quickly.
Yeah. But there were, early on, when I started noticing golf courses, I mentioned at the beginning, my then assistant, this was about 8 years ago, I'd heard a story about a golf course development outside Shanghai where the local, and I love this, the bird watching club, right? A lot of old grannies. They were none too pleased to hear that this golf course is going to come in and raise this little bit of green land that they had, and someone tipped off a journalist who wrote an internal report for the Shanghai government, which knew it was banned, right? But somehow, the bird watching group, they also used the internet to petition the government, and it ends up that course didn't get developed, and you do hear it, but there's no real. The issue of land development, it's a sensitive area for Chinese NGOs to get involved in, because there's a
Definitely.
lot of
Highly
power.
political.
There's a lot of power. It goes right to the top, and there's huge amounts of money involved.
Yeah, I mean, but you do see there are groups that, biodiversity protection, like in Yunnan.
That's probably the first time I've actually heard
You
of
ever
the
heard that?
government.
I can actually hook. It's actually funny. It's actually one of my interns. Her mother was the journalist who did it. So it's like, but this is again.
Personal connection to
Yeah.
But it was like a really interesting way that we got the story about how this golf course, because it was banned. And in all honesty, I mean, the story we heard, from the mother to the daughter to us, was that a lot of the officials in Shanghai had no idea that this golf course was being put up. Because Shanghai is a huge place, and it just, and it can happen so
until
quickly.
it's there.
It's no secret, though. I mean, if you were to fly into Kunming City in Yunnan province, the flight path that takes you down to the runway passes over about 4 or 5 golf courses that are currently in development right now.
Yeah.
I was there like 3 months ago, and this is happening. And everyone just seems to be turning a blind eye to it.
Well, it's considered movement. And it's not to say that all of these are, illegal or something. You have to look into the facts of each situation. But let's say it's a very murky area when you're looking into land use approvals.
Absolutely.
Okay, we got a question. We got 2 questions. We got there in the back, and then we'll come up front.
Hi, my name is Julia Jumid with Deutsche Welle. As you've mentioned, there's a serious law banning the construction of golf courses on the national level, and you said most golf courses are losing money. Then what are the incentives for the business-savvy, profit-oriented developers to keep investing in golf courses?
I think it's important to say that they lose business on the day-to-day, like running of a golf course, but they will actually make money on the property sales. That's the plan, is to basically sell off all the property.
Yeah, not membership, but
They don't.
looking at the associated developments.
Yeah.
But there could also be long-term speculation that, again, because golf is part of the Olympics, and that eventually, once the Chinese Olympic machine starts, you could really see that the Chinese Olympic.
Oh, I think it's going to go in
athletes
the other direction, actually. I believe that you're going to see a lot of these golf courses in prime real estate areas sit there for about 10 or 15 years being unproductive, and then I bet you that land will be resold for other use at
We
some
just look
stage.
at competition issues.
Yeah,
on
it's
this
everywhere.
Map. I mean, you're going to want to go to the best one.
Yeah,
I don't think every one of those will have equal standing, perhaps.
no.
That's good. That's true. They got the land for nothing, and then be able to sell it later or lease it later.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about local government officials, collaborating with local property developers, collaborating with local banks, 0% loans, just getting it done, selling as many villas as they can, and then either handing over the project to someone else and walking away with huge bundles of cash.
Okay, we got a question here. If you don't mind grabbing the mic so you don't have to yell.
Hi, I'm Rose, Rose Chen from the Rose Group, Cross Cultural Understanding. I have actually 2-part questions. I'm surprised to hear that there's a lot of the claim of all the golf courses are private, because I did run into several people in Beijing and Guangzhou, asked them, and they play, they're just a middle class professional, and they play golf, and ask how much it costs, and it's a public course. That's just my experience. The other part is the, like you said, most of the golf course, they're designed by American, professional designer, and it has to be playable. So how intimate, how closely work with the designer, with the developer, and also do they apply the same consideration for water and maintenance and environmental impact as they practice in U.S. or Europe?
I can answer that if you'd like, yeah. I think your first question about public courses is I'm actually not aware, but I do know that the average price is $120, so I'm sure there are courses that are $20 around, as well as other courses that are $300 to $400 around within that spectrum. But to my knowledge, there's no kind of publicly funded golf course that offers reduced rates to the local population. Your second question is, do the golf course developers in North America who build golf courses in China for the property developers, do they adhere to the same standards as in the United States? Not always. And I think that's, I think that golf course development in China is probably much cheaper. And there's less regulations about what you need to do with, runoff water and waste than in North America. And I don't necessarily know of any specific case, but given the way things mostly happen in China, I'm sure corners are being cut. That's just the way business is.
Yeah, but also the fact that, as Tad mentioned, if these are being built with environmental impact assessments, they're being done with, and even EIAs, we've had plenty of meetings on those that are, they can be loosey-goosey, not necessarily fully implemented. So if these are completely banned, they are possibly being built without any kind of regulation. And so who is there to really check?
Or banned except for
Hainan.
At some stage, the Chinese government's going to have to say, okay, we're really putting our foot down, no more courses as of today. And then they're going to have to retroactively go back and organize all of these golf courses and bring them under some kind of platform where they all adhere to specific regulations. Because at the moment, they're not able to stop development, and they're not regulating what has been developed. So they're really...
Yeah, and as you see in some of the laws, like the state council level and others, they say prohibited until further laws are issued. So they're looking forward to say, look, we got to do something to set up a framework for these. And I think that's becoming more and more of an issue. How do we deal with the batch that have, that haven't come under the law? Do we shut them down? Do we give some kind of amnesty? What do we do?
And it's also important that, most local government officials, they know what the state council laws are. And they know that by selling this land for golf course development is, quote unquote, illegal. But they have a chance to profit massively from that sale. And that's why they do it. It's a cash game. I mean, you can sell, land for $100 million, US dollars, siphon off a bit for yourself, give a bit to the farmers, and, cook some books so that you guys can, retire and leave government. This happens, and it's naive to think that it doesn't.
And, and these officials, we've talked about this a lot before in our meetings, that, these officials don't stay in office all that long. They move around. And again, they've made money for the county, increased the GDP.
Yep.
Some other questions out there?
I also saw there was an article in the, I think it's the People's Daily, just last year that mentioned, because you were talking about the school starting to give courses, that mentioned this currently low-cost sort of golf courses are being provided at Tsinghua University, Peking, or Beijing University, and the University of International Relations. I guess it's part of the diplomacy aspect. And also that the Beijing International Golf Club hit its membership capacity of 500 permanent members last year, and they were looking at how to expand that. So.
Yeah, I think it's also wrong to assume that every single golf course is empty. I've been to golf courses in Shanghai that are full, and there are Chinese parents that are getting their children into it at the age of 7. I did a story about this for the New York Times 2 years ago. But it's the minority. I mean, you look at this map behind you. Every single red dot is a golf course, and that's Beijing. I don't think Beijing can sustain having 100 golf courses. Maybe 10, maybe 20. But not 100. So a lot of this land is being kind of misappropriated, so to speak.
So, do you have any more questions or comments out there?
We should pull up Hainan.
Pull up Hainan. That'll be just totally red dots.
Yeah.
I think we were short and sweet today, but you could come up and tackle them more. I know that you might have some more questions on the question about the land use stuff. So okay. Thank you so much. Let's applaud these guys for an excellent meeting.
Thank you for coming.
That was really interesting. All those laws. Okay. And on our next meeting's on. We have a Canadian here, so you should know that we're doing a meeting on the Canadian oil sands, about the pipeline that's being considered built to the coast to ship tar sands, oil to China.
Okay.
So it's on May 5th. I called it, I can't remember our official name, it was like Pipe Dreams. But then also the next day we have a Choke Point China meeting on May 6th, looking at how energy development's impacting water in China. And then I think it's, look on the website. We'll send emails I'm still jet lagged, so I can't remember my next meeting after that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.